Hey, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Mary Hart, who is a fantasy and paranormal romance author. Mary, for readers who are unfamiliar with your work, how would you describe what it is that you write?
It basically covers the genres between my first book was horror with a tad of romance in it, and that was Some Horrific Evening, which was a haunted house novel. And then this one, Graceful Christmas, is pure Hallmark Christmas fun. It is if you love Hallmark Christmas movies and want to find out what would happen if an angel came down to Earth to interfere with her charge's love life and during the Christmas season, this is the book for you.
Sounds great. What do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
Finding the good in the world. We all want to find the good and joy and hope in the world right now. And there's nothing better than that for the Christmas season than to kind of remember the joy of Christmas, the joy you felt as a kid when you first learned about Santa Claus and snowmen and, went up to go see a Christmas tree that's lit up. That's the kind of joy that I try to bring into the world. And I bring joy into the world as well by wearing an inflatable pink T-Rex costume, which is on the cover of the book. There is Pinky T-Rexadera right there. And so I had to make sure that that kind of joy and goodness was brought into the world further, especially in times like these, through a graceful Christmas.
And you seem to have this thing about T-Rexes, don't you?
I do. I mean, I started during the pandemic. I had a pink T-Rex suit, and I was like, you know what? I need to spread some good out there. So I started doing some very strange videos of just Pinky T-Rexadero dancing around or washing the car or trying to make a basket. And spoiler alert, you can't make a basketball with tiny little T-Rex arms and a big snout. It doesn't work. But it caught on, and I started doing them for LinkedIn, for friends and family through Facebook and Instagram and TikTok at the time when I was on it. And I also got dressed up in the suit to entertain a bunch of kids outside of a preschool. And it was during the pandemic, so they were outside, I was outside, I was in the suit, and they called me Barbie Dino, which was they just loved that Barbie Dino came to roar at them and laugh at them and laugh with them and give them some fun. We all
That's
need.
funny. You also wrote a short story,
I
but
did. I wrote a short story about the Pink T-Rex, and that was in the collection anthology called Totally Tubular Terrors. And that was a one that we put together to help fund medical bills for a friend of ours who's now passed on. But it was an 80s themed trilogy collection. And that one was about my story was about the a girl who comes across a T-Rex suit, a costume back in the 80s, complete with a plastic mask, and she tries it on and bad things happen.
okay. So, getting back to a graceful Christmas.
Mhm.
What was the inspiration for a graceful Christmas?
A Graceful Christmas has been floating around in my head for the past 7 or so years. After I wrote the first book, I really wanted to just write something that was pure sweetness and romance and just kindness and good. And so this book, actually, the idea of it first stemmed from a college class I took back in high school. I always had to be an overachiever. And I took a college class about creative writing at Cape Cod Community College while I was in high school. And one of the scenes from this book was what I wrote as my final project. And I received such good feedback on it. And over the years, it kind of took different spins and turns as to what the story was going to be. But then I finally thought about it and realized it had to be a Christmas tale and it had to be this Christmas tale. And so I made it part of the book. It's one of the first scenes where the two main characters meet each other in person for the first time. And it was at an art gallery where the main character's painting is located. And it just has stuck with me in my head. It's been a matter of just finding the time to write it and get it out there. But it's always been back in the back of my head. And then, of course, when I had the T-Rex suit, that had to go in there as well.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the story?
Absolutely. It is about a high school art teacher, and she has just been dumped by her boyfriend, and it's the Christmas season, and she's looking to find some joy and some laughter. And there's an angel up in heaven, and her name is Chloe. And Chloe has the main character, Grace, as her first charge. And so Chloe is very interested in Grace's life, and she believes strongly that Grace and her ex belong together. Based on no real reason except for a spark of electricity that she saw at the time. So she decided that's what love is, that spark. So she begs and begs and begs and is able to go down to Earth with her friend Mitchell, who's also an angel. He also has a charge that he's watching. And while they're down on Earth, they have jobs and they work for a local Parks and Rec department. And Chloe winds up in the pink T-Rex suit as part of that. In fact, she's wearing it when she first meets Grace for the first time, which is a little strange way to meet someone for the first time, but hey. And while she's down on Earth and interfering and enjoying all the Christmas joy that can be bringing, Grace has met someone else. And Chloe wants to interfere and doesn't want them together, doesn't think they belong together in the slightest because she belongs with the ex. But she and her charge and her friend all learn about the true meaning of Christmas and what true love actually is and what humanity is like, all wrapped into one.
Oh, wow. That sounds wonderful.
Well, thank
So,
you.
what were the steps that you took to bring it from the initial inspiration to a finished product?
Lots and lots of notebooks. I write down, I am very old school, and then I write down, I have three different notebooks here that all have different versions of A Graceful Christmas in it with the characters and what they look like and what their motivation is and little scenes that come to me and also on my phone. Because unfortunately, things come to me while I'm driving. So thankfully, Siri, please don't come up on my phone right now. And apologies to anyone if that made your phone go off. It has voice notes, so I can just call up Siri on my phone while I'm driving and tell her, or just basically just say what I think the story is going to be, or something that's come to me. So I have a whole slew of notes on my phone for that story and for others, and with the notebooks. So the process is usually when I'm able to find time to write, or I make time to write. I then sit down and take those notes in the notebooks and in the notes app and put them together into actual words.
What a great idea.
Yeah.
When you're driving, you could actually write.
Oh, exactly. And it comes in very handy because for a while I was trying to find a voice recorder and I'm like, well, that's not going to work because I need to actually, be able to just have it written out for myself. And it's interesting though sometimes what Siri decides words are, because if I'm saying something like Jordan or Wyatt or the characters' names, she'll come up with the most bizarre statements of what I have said. But so that's always kind of fascinating and funny in its own way, and sometimes leads to different tales.
So, you mentioned the characters.
Yes.
You were talking about the characters, and they're like kind of in one notebook and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, do you write as the characters first, or do you write the plot first?
I write the plot first. For most of my books, I always know how it's going to begin and how it's going to end, and a lot of the scenes in the middle. And then I kind of have the characters come to life after I figured that out. And then I have to write the daunting part of the middle. Because if I could just create the beginning and the end, it would be great. But there's the stuff that gets you from here to there. That's the most important part.
So, do you really outline it first, or are you a pantser?
I am a combination of both because I outline what I think the story is going to go and how it's going to go. And so that's what the notebooks are for. That's where I have the plots and the different ideas and everything that goes into it. But then as I'm writing, sometimes the characters will get away from me and the plot will get away from me, and I suddenly find them doing something they weren't going to be doing, but it works out in the end.
Yep. That's what happens a lot. The characters just have their own minds.
Oh, exactly. In
Go
the
ahead,
first
do it.
book, in Some Horrific Evening, a character had little bit of a development that, and as people do, they grow and learn over time. And she had basically a personality that wasn't really planned to. She was going to be a very shallow background character and then became someone who had her own full life and her own turns and twists, and it was interesting.
Okay. So what kind of research went into writing at Graceful
Sure,
Christmas?
for Graceful Christmas, it really wasn't a lot of research because of the fact that it's a cute little Christmas story. The only thing I went to research were a bunch of information about artists and just making sure I had some facts and history about them correct. Because as an art teacher and as an artist, Grace taught is very inspired by Van Gogh or Van Gogh, if you follow Doctor Who, and Renoir and Monet, and I wanted to make sure that I listed the painting names correctly. So that was the big form of research. Everything else was kind of just made up.
Okay, interesting. All right. So what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out a Graceful Christmas?
Literally just timing because I have a full-time job and a life outside of writing the book and a family. And so, I spend a lot of time with my son, and it was just a matter of making sure I made the time. And it's not finding the time, it's making the time to sit down and actually just write. And for this one, it took me a lot longer than I planned to. The book is devoted to a friend of mine, Josh, who passed away last year. And he's one of the characters in the book. He and his husband, Zach, and the book I meant for him to read because there's a lot of him in it and a lot of things. His character just came to life. He's a former coworker who became a good friend. And so after he passed, I was like, you know what? I really just need to make this book happen. I know he's not going to read it, but Zach will, and people who know Josh will. And that was what is important to me to help him live on in a sense.
Okay. So what character, was there a character that you loved or hated the most in the
I
book?
loved writing Chloe, the angel, the most, mainly because she was the pink T-Rex person. And she is, she's flawed in her own way because she was very one-minded in what she thought love was and what she thought life was. And so she learned through this, and it was fun to see her challenges and overcoming what she thought life was and what love was. The character I hated writing the most, I mean, I guess would have to be, spoiler alert, the ex, just because he was just not a fun guy.
Ah, I think you're giving away some things.
I might be, but that's kind of the hallmark of a Hallmark story.
Right. Okay. So what can we expect from you in the near future?
I am currently working on another book, which is going to be a novella, most likely, unless I make it expand far more where it's supposed to be. And that one I've been working on for a while, and it is a kind of a dark Hallmark Christmas tale in a sense, because a woman meets what she thinks is going to be the total meet cute in a small town, and things don't go well. So that is the kind of the combination of some horrific evening and a graceful Christmas and ties them two together.
Oh, interesting. I mean,
Yes.
would you consider that a dark romance?
Not really a dark romance so much as a Hallmark with a twist, in a sense. I've told a bunch of people about it. It's called Twinkling Lights, and everyone who's heard about it wants to read it and can't wait to read it. But yeah, it's kind of a twist between the two.
Okay, sounds good. Now I have questions about you as a writer.
Sure.
What's your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
The people I've met and getting my books out there into the world. The basically and making those books come to life. The first book came to me in a dream. A big plot of it came to me in a dream one day, and I thankfully had a notebook next to me and wrote it down the next morning. While this one is just kind of the one that's more about my heart in itself and is more me than the first book was. Not the characters are me by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, I know people like to think that they're like, oh, which one's you? And none of them are me. Even though, there's the pink T-Rex suit, they're still characters that came from my head rather than being aspects of me. But that's what I like is creating these worlds. And that's the best part of being a writer is just creating these worlds that you can dive into at any time.
Okay, and when you create the characters, do you use people that you know a
No,
lot?
well, except for Josh and Zach, but the other ones are just based entirely off figments of my brain. And for in the first book, the two main characters were modeled after Booth and Brennan or Bones from the TV show Bones. That was what I had in my mind, in my head, as to what they look like, and not their personalities or anything like that, but just, that model. So I like to model them after people.
Ah, okay, sounds good.
And celebrities, not people I know.
Okay, and what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process, and how do you overcome that?
The most challenging part is coming up with the plot points of, how to get from that beginning to that end and what's going to happen along the way, and then taking the time to write it as well. I found that in the past, NaNoWriMo National Novel Writing Month, which I'm sure we all know about, helped me significantly in making sure, because I'm very much I'm very old school. I have the notebook. I have the thing. Writing down, marking off the number of words I write each day helps me to be able to keep a formula along the way and keep that going. I haven't done that this year just because it hasn't been as important to me as spending time with family and friends and finding the joy and doing work. Um, but that is the way that I get around that challenge the most, is just making a time and setting time to actually sit down and write.
Mhm. What has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
My favorite adventure has to be the first reading I ever did for my first book. And it was at the Concord Library. And at the time, it was very fortuitous because it was on my birthday and was in Concord, which is where I had set my first book. So having that there was just a goal. It was a life dream. Just being able to read part of my book and getting reactions and seeing people, be interested in the book was really what stood out to me the most.
Oh, great. So, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned during your writing career?
That it's so important to write what you love, because otherwise you're going to be writing things that don't really matter much to you. You have to have some form of interest in the book, obviously. And it helps with a lesson I've learned is really just to sit down and write. That's the key element. Just make the time, sit down, write, and make it happen.
Hmm. And is there any other advice that you'd like to give other writers?
Read, because you're going to learn a lot about your own style of writing and what you like from the books that you read, and get out there and talk to other writers and just basically be open-minded to everything you see around you and everything you see and hear and read, because they can inspire your own writing.
Okay. Are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you would recommend to other writers that may have helped you in your career?
Oh, absolutely. The New England horror writers, and I have to be very careful how I say that word because it sometimes comes across as not it, HORROR. They have been a huge help and inspiration to me. There's some of my best friends in the New England area, and besides my college friends, obviously. And I've learned so much from them about writing and making sure we write and, promoting the books and all of that.
Okay, that sounds great. Now, questions about you as a person.
Sure.
What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
Oh gosh. That's a tough one because I'm kind of an open book. One thing people don't write, one of those fun facts, where people are like, oh, tell us a fun fact about yourself. I'm left-handed, but I cannot cut scissors with my left hand, because back in elementary school, the nuns, I was at a Catholic school at that time, would not let me use the green scissors because can't. That's very bad. You can't use the green scissors. You have to use the right-handed scissors. So I can only cut with my right hand. But I also have, for a lefty and in general, the best penmanship of all time, which is the strangest thing to have.
Your
And
left
especially
hand.
for a lefty, I know.
Wow.
Yeah,
Southpaw.
exactly. Yeah, very much a southpaw.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Um, what question do you wish interviewers would ask you, and what would your answer be?
Oh, that's an interesting question. The hmm, the question that the question I would like answer is what music inspires you for your books?
Oh,
Because that is something that I have a Spotify playlist for each of my books that I create. And in the first book, that one entirely was 50s music. Anything to deal with the 50s or the 40s or anything like that, that inspired that book completely. But weirdly, I say that the song that inspired that book was the song Creep by Radiohead, which is not from the 1950s or 1940s, but it's mentioned in the prologue of the book and it's mentioned in every conversation I've had about the book. For this one, it's mainly all Christmas tales, obviously, but the song Miracles from the 80s or 70s, whenever it was, kept coming back and keeps showing up on the radio to me again and again. And that's the song that I believe of for this one.
ah, that makes sense, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Okay. Hmm. Okay. So, what is or are your passions when you're not writing? And how do you make time to do the things that you love?
Absolutely. My passions are technology and robotics because that's my full-time job. And my passions are basically making sure that I am helping in promoting the world of autism because my son's on the spectrum and I am as well. So, and that was recently found out. So that was
Yeah.
a interesting little find out for 51 years old, but
Oh,
it makes sense looking back on it. So that's part of one of my passions and just spreading joy and making sure that I spend time with my family and friends and enjoying life because that's what we're here for. Mhm.
okay. Um, so what does your writing space look like?
It is just a desk in my bedroom, which is where I work from home as well. And I have the sunlight coming in from both sides and behind me, but I don't have that open right now because I would be a big dark blur if I did that to you. And
Not
so
good.
yeah, it is a just a desk that has a potential to be a stand-up desk, but I want to just stand and write. And I have some crystals here on the side and my cute little Chilean three-legged pig that my son
Uh-huh.
gave me for Christmas last year. He's to bring luck, so he sits and looks at me all the time and makes sure that I am writing.
Oh, okay. And what do you have to have with you when you're writing or editing?
I need my notebooks because I then can go back and look and see, make sure that I've written down what I needed to do or make any edits there to make sure I'm following the characters correctly. And so a pen and then always a bottle of water with me or something akin to that to make sure that I'm staying hydrated because it's very easy to just, when I'm writing, fall into the world of what I'm writing and forget about everything else for a while.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about food? Do you normally have snacks or whatever?
Well, no, I make sure to take time to like go eat like regular meals, but then I usually it depends on the day. I will either have some, crispy little saltine cracker type things, the oyster crackers with me. This is one of my favorite bizarre salty snacks, or my favorite candy is bottle caps, which are these tiny little candies that are in different, orange, root beer, Coca-Cola candies that I can only find at old time candy companies now, or sometimes at apparently Five Below. I haven't looked there yet, but those are my favorite. Or of course the good old Reese's peanut butter cups because you have to have Reese's.
Absolutely. So you mentioned already about the music.
Yep.
Do you have to have music when you're writing, or do you sit in silence? Or can you write anywhere other than your desk?
I can write anywhere, but I prefer having music on in the background, be it either from my own playlists or by having the Christmas music station on the TV in the background, just so I can have some kind of sound. If I need to really focus, then I will have silence, but I prefer to have the noise just as kind of a counteraction to kind of put me further into that world.
I know you said you can write in your car and things like that, but I meant,
Exactly. Yeah, that could come
but I
along. Yeah,
did,
I definitely don't have the music playing at that time.
but I did mean,
Yeah, when
actually
I'm
getting
sitting
down
here.
and
Yes.
editing and things like that. Okay. Um, now, how important is the New England setting to your
To me,
books?
it's very important because it's what I know. So the first book, like I said, was set in Concord, and this one is in the made up completely town of Silverton, which is kind of based sort of on Haverhill and the surrounding areas. But there's also in it, there's a mention of a waterfall dam with a gazebo next to it that I've taken out of its usual context and placed next to a Chinese restaurant in the book. But in reality, there's the Middlesex Canal Museum, which is down in the Billerica area. And there's right across from that museum, there is a dam with like a waterfall of sorts in a gazebo right there. And so every time I drive by there or I go there, it was very much um, a strong reason for having part of the book be set there. So
Ah,
New England's very important just because of that's what I know.
oh, interesting. So the places in your book are really places that you have seen.
Some of them are. I just kind of move them around to different places. Like, for example, there's a karaoke scene in the book, and that's based on the Oriental Garden in Haverhill, but it does not have a waterfall next to it. It has a pet
Okay.
supply company next to it, from what I understand. There's an art gallery mentioned in the book, which does not exist that I'm aware of, and that's set in a mill in a town near Silverton, which is kind of based off the old mills in Lawrence that are now different. They can be studios, for stores or art places. I'm sure there's an art gallery there somewhere, but that one is definitely a made up spot.
It was sort of a mix and match, right?
Exactly. I've kind of moved things around and created part of my own New England version.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes.
All right. Now, I just have two more questions.
Sure.
One is, where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester?
Of
And
course.
I have to do a plug for Annie's.
Yes.
So you can get Mary's books at Annie's. If you call us at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. Now, where else can people find your books?
People can find them at Lala Books in Lowell, at Andover Bookstore in Andover, and through bookshop dot, I hope it's dot
Or
org. Oh, yeah, thank you. Where you can then have the funds donated to any bookstore that you want to, any bookstore like Annie's.
okay. And how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Perfect. You can follow me on Instagram at fashionable author or go to my website at Mary E. H. Hart, MaryEhHart.com.
Okay, not to be confused with the Mary Hart, who is Entertainment Tonight.
Exactly. That's
So
part of my LinkedIn profile is that I'm not that Mary Hart.
and when you try and look her up on Google,
You
it's
can't find me.
everything is very hard. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mary. This was great,
Thank
and
you so much for having
hopefully
me. Mm,
you're not too far from the store. You're just kind of north of here,
exactly.
right?
Yes.
And so maybe someday you'll come down and visit.
Definitely. I've been there a few times and I love the whole Doctor
Uh,
Who aspect that you have there and love the store. It's such a great store.
Thank you, Mary Hart. Thanks for talking.
Thank you.